There's some misinformation going around about me that's simply not true. I don't have a disdain for Christianity or Christians. Now, I do sort of feel sorry for several, not all of them, but several. And I guess the only way to explain why or what I'm talking about is tell you what happened. See, growing up, I didn't grow up in the best of households. I grew up a ward of the state, but I was invited to church a lot as a child. Um, like every time I'd go into a new house, new state, new city, new school, I always got invited to a different church. And I'd go there and they'd always ask me if I wanted to go to heaven or hell, or if I knew if I was going to heaven. And they'd have me say some magic words, but they never once asked me about my home life. I'm a child that walks in there looking like a cancer patient with two black eyes, but not a single person cared about me. They just cared about saving my soul. Well, a few years later, when I was 17, I was homeless, and I was living out of a 1988 Ford Thunderbird, golden color. Cost me $200. I had a full-time job, and I was still going to school, but I was drunk all the time. Now, a woman who should not have took me in, let me sleep on her couch, and I did for several years. Now, she was a middle-aged woman, but she was making a minimum wage, taking care of two teenage daughters. And here, this 17-year-old drunk kid is sleeping on her couch all the time, but she still takes me in. Now, she was a very devout Christian. But she never talked to me about God. She never tried to convince me of anything. She just invited me to church. And through the law of reciprocity, I felt obligated to go. So I went. And I even got baptized. I went pretty regularly. But the longer I go, the more I started noticing things. One, people hated questions. God, on Wednesday when we did Bible study, I'd ask questions and they'd get pissed at me because I would even dare ask a question. But what I noticed even more than that was how sad it was. Nobody was helping anybody. They were just looking for a handout. I mean, just trying to get somebody to take care of them, praying to God to heal them, but they weren't helping anybody else. And I came to a realization, she was a Christian, but I didn't know who these people were. So I stepped away from the church and I started studying other religious beliefs. I never became anything else totally. I just started reading about the history of other beliefs and what they thought. Now, fast forward about 20 years, I'd already gone through a career as a police officer. I was working as a car salesman. And this dealership that I ended up working at was a Christian dealership. And they had Bible study on Friday mornings. It seemed kind of odd for a car dealership to be be full of Christians, but it worked. And we had Bible study, and I started learning. I started actually getting curious, and I actually read the letters that were written in red. Now, if you're a Christian or know the Bible, the letters in red are supposedly what Jesus said himself. And it wasn't the Jesus I was told about. Added to that, I'd heard some people there cuss, and I didn't know Christians could cuss. I even said that. I'm like, why are you cussing? I thought you weren't allowed to cuss. They're like, no. Some denominations choose not to. Some people choose not to, but there's nothing that says you're going to hell for cussing. So I got real curious, and I actually became a Christian. I studied Jesus' life and what he'd said and done. And what I noticed was Jesus would heal people, but he wouldn't ask them what their spiritual beliefs were. He wouldn't ask them what their denomination was. There wasn't such a thing back then, but you know what I mean? What faith they had. And he didn't start preaching at people when he healed them. Because honestly, when you when you help somebody and you do anything, even if you start preaching that your belief system, you take away what you're doing. You take from it. So now it feels like you're not doing it because you actually care about the other person. You're doing it to get another notch on your belt because you're getting something out of it, because you're getting them to come into your faith. But Jesus didn't do that. And it really got to me. I'm like, why do Christians call themselves Christians, which means to be Christ-like, but they don't do that? In fact, if you go to church, I haven't been to a church that preaches what Jesus preached. They teach things throughout the Bible, but the lessons Jesus actually taught is rarely spoken at church. They just speak Jesus' name. To me, that's just something seems wrong about that. Now, I'm not saying they're wrong at all. I believe you can believe in what you believe. I'm not trying to get you to believe in anything. I just want to love on people. That's what Jesus said when somebody asked him, what's the most important commandment? Jesus said, nobody will be able to fulfill all commandments. However, love God with all your heart, all your strength, and all your might. And meaning just as equally as loving God, love your neighbor as yourself. That means you have to love all three. That wasn't something I was taught. And if he said that's the most important commandment, that means everything else is subservient. That means a Christian is somebody that loves everybody. Everybody. Doesn't matter if you're across the aisle. Doesn't matter if you're a horrible person. You're supposed to love them because the Bible does say, we were made in the image of God. And if you studied anything by Dr. Joe Dispenza, he's even said that if you go down far enough in our skin, through our skin, our muscles, or everything, you just go as far as you can, magnify, and you will see that we are nothing but light and vibration. We're part of God. Now, if we're part of God, that means when you're loving your neighbor, you are loving God. And that's what I want to do. I just want to love people. I just want people to see that you don't have to be going through this shit. That there are people with you. Because if I would have known that, I spent 37 years of my life thinking I was all alone. And Christians were a big part of that. I know there's a lot of good Christians out there, and I see differently. But there's a lot of them that are exactly what I thought they were. They're too busy telling me that I'm not good enough. I have a shirt that says Jesus is a badass. And I had people that were supposed to be close friends of mine try to lecture me about saying that. Well, they like to tell me that, well, in Romans 12:3, it says, you should be separate from the world. Well, in 1 Corinthians 9:20-24, Paul wrote, I became weak to win the weak. I become all things to all men so that I can win a few. That's called adapting. I highly doubt God is going to say, you're not speaking the right slang of your generation. And so because of that, you're lowering the bar of Christianity, which, by the way, was told to me that I'm lowering the bar of Christianity. I don't give two shits and a giggle. It's who I am. People should quit focusing on other people and how they're doing wrong. Focus on yourself. Just say, hey, am I loving this person? Is this showing love? Yeah, I can hate this person for this because they're not being the person I think they should be. But where have I messed up in my life? People like to judge people without having any kind of context, without knowing anything about their lives, why it turned them into the way they are. People don't just become a certain way. There's something that formed them into that belief system and into that way. Ask questions. We live in a world where people have voices but no ears. They don't care what somebody else says or thinks. They just care that their voice is heard. Like, oh, you didn't hear me. Well, you're not listening either. So what is my problem with Christians? Honestly, it's my problem with people. People just aren't loving each other. They pretend like they are. But love is sacrifice. That's what love literally is. The more you love somebody, the more you're willing to sacrifice for them. If you're not sacrificing anything, are you loving? If you're telling somebody that they're gay and that's a sin, well, they know what you believe. So are you helping them? Are you making their lives better? Are you getting them closer to God? Are you just saying that you're right and they're wrong? Sounds more like being self-righteous and not righteous. We all could do a lot better. I could do a lot better. I'm trying. I screw up all the time. And we're all hypocrites. Every one of us. But it's the heart. I don't judge you by your belief system. I have friends that are very far left liberals, and I'm a pretty strong conservative. We disagree, but I don't talk about it because I'm not going to convince them of what I believe. I don't want to. I judge them by their heart. A lot of people actually mean well. We need more of that.